Over the last few years, our parish has been developing a risk register. Now, risk registers might be well known to many of you involved in business and operations, but it's been a bit of a learning curve for me to understand how they work. Because a risk register is a way of, categorising what are all the things that could go wrong in the church, naming them as risks, and then saying, for each one, how bad would this be? And therefore, what should we do about it to mitigate or minimise that risk? So, for example, could the church burn down? Well, yes, it could. There's a lot of wood here. And so, would that be a bad thing? Yes, it would be very bad. So what can we do to prevent that, to minimise that risk? We can make sure that we have up-to-date power circuits and power boards, which we have done. We have fire extinguishers, which in this church are in the sacristy behind me here and the main sacristy at the front door. And so these are things we can do to name a risk and then to minimise it. And so in that way, a little bit of worry is actually a good thing. Because if we didn't worry at all about the church burning down, then we wouldn't take any of those steps to prevent it. If I didn't worry at all about ever having a car accident or being injured on the road, then I would drive out of control. I wouldn't obey the speed limit. But if I'm a bit worried, then I will drive the speed limit, I will make sure I don't drink alcohol and drive, I'll make sure I wear my seatbelt. And so a little bit of worry can keep us safe. It's not a bad thing to worry about things at least a bit. But if I began to worry all the time, if I was continually worried about the church burning down, even when I'd done every reasonable thing I could do to mitigate that risk, or if I was always worried about having a terrible car accident every time I got in the car, I might start to say that's more anxiety than just general worry. Or if I became just anxious and if I became worried about just sort of everything, and I couldn't kind of control those thoughts, if thoughts keep coming to me, even when I didn't want to think about them, that's anxiety. And sadly, many people in Australia suffer from anxiety in its many forms and many grades. And that's something we really need to, be attentive to, that many people struggle a lot with this. So I don't want to make light of it at all. But today we might look through the lens of anxiety at the gospel today, where Jesus is in the boat with his disciples. And a storm comes up on the lake. And we know that storms on Lake Galilee can be quite ferocious. And for the ancient people, they were particularly afraid of storms. And so the disciples are panicking. They're saying, Jesus, we're going to sink. The boat, we're going to drown. The boat's going to sink. That's the risk on the risk register then. The boat could sink and we could drown. But Jesus doesn't seem concerned at all. He's there asleep in the boat. When they wake him, Jesus gets up and he calms the storm for them. And we know there are other times when Jesus calms the storm as well. But he then looks at them and says, why did you not have faith? Why did you worry so much? And that might seem a bit unfair to us that Jesus says this to them. So I wonder why. Why does Jesus chide his disciples for worrying about the boat sinking? Well, I guess one way of understanding that is that Jesus was not going to drown. And if Jesus was not going to drown, they were not going to drown either. Jesus was asleep in the boat. He was not worried. And so the disciples could have looked at him and taken their cue from him in this case. And that's, I think, a way we can actually try to do something about our own anxieties as well. Many years ago, I was particularly worried about something, and I can't remember what it is now, but I remember my spiritual director at the time gave me the exercise in prayer to go and be in that boat, in that storm, with Jesus. To look at the waves and look at the wind and look at all the effects of the storm and name all my worries, to sort of cast them upon the storm. Say, I feel like the storm is going on in my life. And then to look at Jesus and say, what is Jesus doing? Well, he's asleep. Where do I want to be right now? Do I want to be anxious and fearful, or could I lie down next to Jesus? Could I fall asleep next to him? And it was a real lesson for me of surrendering control, rather than being panicky above deck and thinking, what can I do? What can I do? To say, can I just go and be with Jesus, the sleeping Jesus? And so that's the exercise I want to invite you to do. That whatever worries you might have, and then to do this is not any substitute for medication or therapy. If you have those, please keep doing them because they are important things for our overall mental health. But to also, alongside those things, see if we can bring the spiritual element in, where we look to Jesus and see that he is not worried, so we can take our cue from him and not be worried, not be afraid either. So I invite you to do what I did, which is to go and be with the sleeping Jesus. Perhaps you do it the way I did, where you place yourself in your imagination in prayer in the boat and you look at the waves and the storm. Or it might be that you bring Jesus into the situation which worries you most. Maybe you find yourself always anxious and worried when you're in your office or in your house, or when you visit a certain relative's place, or when there's a certain situation that you find always brings worrying, anxious, intrusive thoughts to mind. Ask Jesus to be there and imagine Jesus asleep on the floor or on the chair in that place. And just gaze upon the sleeping, calm, unworried Jesus and say, could I be there with him? And if you can in your prayer, in the imaginative prayer, let yourself be still with him. The storm was going on, but Jesus was not afraid. And sometimes Jesus will turn around and get up and calm the storm for us, like he did for the disciples that day. But other days he would just simply say, come, be with me. Take your eyes off the storm, at least for a little while, and be with me. Come, find rest for your soul. We hear Jesus speaking other places in the gospel saying, do not worry about your life, what you are to eat and what you are to wear. Many times Jesus says, do not be afraid, do not worry. So if you feel anxious about anything or everything, let Jesus speak those words to you. Lie down next to him, be calm and be still.